The Troubles, spanning from the late 1960s to the Good Friday Agreement of 1998, remain one of the most defining and traumatic chapters in modern Irish and British history. This deeply complex conflict arose from a web of political, religious, and cultural tensions, with its roots in centuries-old divisions, but its execution and resolution shaped by contemporary realities. A precarious peace. Post-partition. Our previous 3 videos have explained the journey to partition and through the Irish Civil War. But just to recap briefly, the partition of Ireland in 1921 created Northern Ireland as a separate entity within the United Kingdom. This partition was designed to secure the Unionist majority's ties to Britain, but left a substantial Catholic and nationalist minority under Unionist rule. The political landscape of Northern Ireland was starkly divided. Unionists, primarily Protestant, supported the link with Britain and dominated the state apparatus. Nationalists, mainly Catholic, sought reunification with the Republic of Ireland. The government system in Northern Ireland was built to favor the Unionist majority, employing gerrymandering and discriminatory policies that disenfranchised Catholics in housing, education, and employment. For decades, these injustices simmered beneath the surface. While outwardly there was peace, tension between the two communities persisted, laying the groundwork for the explosion of violence that became the Troubles. The spark, the civil rights movement, and the onset of violence. By the 1960s, inspired by global civil rights movements, Catholics in Northern Ireland began organizing to demand equality. The Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, NICRE, spearheaded campaigns for fair housing, voting reform, and an end to institutional discrimination. In 1968, peaceful marches by NICRE were met with violent responses from the Royal Ulster Constabulary, RUC, and loyalist groups. Footage of police brutality, such as the attack on marchers in Derry on October 5, 1968, shocked international audiences. Tensions boiled over during the Battle of the Bogside in August 1969. Sparked by a Unionist parade passing through a nationalist neighborhood in Derry, the confrontation escalated into days of rioting between Catholic residents and the police. Similar violence erupted across Northern Ireland, and British troops were deployed to restore order. Initially welcomed by Catholics as protectors, the British Army soon became another antagonistic force in the eyes of the nationalist community. The emergence of paramilitary groups. The escalating conflict saw the rise of armed groups on both sides. For nationalists, the Provisional Irish Republican Army, IRA, emerged as the dominant force, advocating for armed struggle to achieve a united Ireland. On the Unionist side, loyalist paramilitaries like the Ulster Volunteer Force, UVF, and the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, formed to counter the IRA and protect Protestant communities. These groups waged a brutal war that terrorized civilians and created a vicious cycle of violence. Bombings, assassinations, and sectarian killings became tragically routine. IRA campaigns. The IRA targeted British military personnel, police, and infrastructure. High-profile attacks, such as the Brighton Hotel bombing in 1984, brought the conflict to the heart of British politics. Loyalist violence. Loyalist groups targeted Catholic civilians and areas, aiming to intimidate nationalist communities and undermine IRA support. Civilians as victims. The majority of those killed during the Troubles were civilians, caught in the crossfire or targeted due to their perceived affiliation with one side or the other. Major incidents of the Troubles. Bloody Sunday, 1972. On January 30th, 1972, British soldiers shot 26 unarmed civilians during a civil rights march in Derry, killing 14. The event galvanized nationalist anger and swelled IRA recruitment. Internment without trial, 1971. The introduction of internment targeted suspected IRA members but disproportionately affected Catholics, fueling resentment and further violence. Birmingham pub bombings, 1974. The IRA carried out a bombing in Birmingham, England, killing 21 and injuring 182. The attack intensified British resolve to suppress the IRA. The Hunger Strikes, 1981. IRA prisoners protested their status as criminals rather than political prisoners by refusing food. Bobby Sands' death and election to the British Parliament during the strike brought international attention to the cause. The Enniskillen bombing, 1987. An IRA bomb during a Remembrance Day service killed 11 civilians, highlighting the indiscriminate nature of violence during the conflict. British and Irish government roles. The British government's role in the Troubles was contentious. Initially perceived as neutral peacekeepers, British troops became deeply involved, and controversial policies like internment and the use of undercover operatives undermined trust in their impartiality. The Irish government, while officially neutral, faced criticism for failing to control IRA activity near the border. However, successive Irish governments played a crucial role in brokering peace, culminating in the Good Friday Agreement, the path to peace. The Good Friday Agreement. Years of violence took a toll on all sides. By the 1990s, peace negotiations began to gain traction, with the involvement of both the British and Irish governments, as well as U.S. mediation. The Good Friday Agreement, also known as the Belfast Agreement, signed on April 10, 1998, was a monumental step in ending decades of violence during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It was the result of intense negotiations involving the British and Irish governments, Northern Irish political parties, and international mediators, notably the United States. The agreement sought to address the political, social, and cultural divisions that had fueled conflict for over 3 decades, providing a framework for peace and cooperation. Key provisions of the agreement. The Good Friday Agreement was built on several foundational principles. Constitutional status of Northern Ireland. The agreement affirmed that Northern Ireland would remain part of the United Kingdom as long as the majority of its people wished it. However, it also recognized the possibility of a united Ireland in the future if a majority in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland voted for it. Power-sharing government. The establishment of a devolved government in Northern Ireland was central to the agreement. This government would be based on proportional representation to ensure participation from both unionist and nationalist communities. The Northern Ireland Assembly, a new legislative body with elected representatives from all communities. The Executive Committee, a power-sharing executive to include representatives from the major parties. North-South cooperation. The agreement created institutions for cooperation between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The North-South Ministerial Council allowed representatives from both regions to collaborate on issues of mutual interest, such as trade and tourism. East-West cooperation. The British-Irish Council and British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference were established to promote cooperation between the UK and Ireland on broader matters. Recognition of identity. The agreement acknowledged the right of the people of Northern Ireland to identify as British, Irish, or both. It emphasized respect for cultural diversity and the need to promote mutual understanding. Decommissioning of weapons. Paramilitary groups, including the Irish Republican Army, IRA, and loyalist militias, committed to disarmament. This process, overseen by an independent commission, was a crucial step in building trust between communities. Policing and justice reform. The Royal Ulster Constabulary, RUC, long seen as biased by the Catholic community, was restructured and renamed the Police Service of Northern Ireland, PSNI. Efforts were made to make the force more representative of the population. Human rights protections. The agreement included commitments to strengthen human rights protections, including the establishment of a Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission. The role of international mediators. The involvement of international actors was pivotal in the success of the Good Friday Agreement. The United States. U.S. Senator George Mitchell acted as an independent chair of the peace talks, bringing credibility and a neutral perspective to the process. President Bill Clinton's administration also lent strong support, emphasizing the importance of U.S. involvement in brokering peace. The European Union. The EU supported the peace process through funding programs aimed at fostering cross-community projects and economic development in Northern Ireland. Challenges in reaching agreement. The road to the Good Friday Agreement was fraught with difficulties. Mistrust. Decades of violence had created deep mistrust between unionists and nationalists, as well as between political leaders and paramilitary groups. Opposition. Hardline factions within both communities opposed the agreement. Unionists feared it was a step toward a united Ireland, while some nationalists believed it legitimized British control of Northern Ireland. Negotiations. The talks were marked by walkouts, brinkmanship, and intense debates over contentious issues, particularly the decommissioning of weapons. The aftermath and implementation. While the Good Friday Agreement was a landmark achievement, its implementation was far from straightforward. Referendums. The agreement was put to referendums in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in May 1998. It received overwhelming support, with 71% of voters in Northern Ireland and 94% in the Republic endorsing it. Continuing violence. Despite the agreement, sporadic violence persisted, particularly from dissident Republican groups who rejected the peace process. Stalled institutions. Power-sharing arrangements faced numerous setbacks, including suspensions of the Northern Ireland Assembly due to political deadlock over issues like policing and cultural rights. Impact and legacy. The Good Friday Agreement is widely regarded as a model for conflict resolution, demonstrating the power of dialogue, compromise, and international cooperation. Reduction in violence. The agreement significantly reduced violence in Northern Ireland, with paramilitary groups decommissioning their weapons and British military operations winding down. Improved relations. Relations between the UK and Ireland improved, and the agreement fostered greater understanding between unionist and nationalist communities. Economic and social development. The peace process allowed Northern Ireland to attract investment, boost tourism, and focus on rebuilding communities. But despite its successes, the Good Friday Agreement did not resolve all of Northern Ireland's issues. Paramilitary groups agreed to decommission their weapons, and a new policing structure replaced the RUC. While the agreement did not resolve all tensions, it marked a turning point toward peace. We'll bring you the fifth and final part of our series tomorrow, examining the possible futures which await Northern Ireland. Legacy and lessons of the Troubles. The Troubles claimed over 3,500 lives, with thousands more injured or traumatized. Communities were scarred by violence and division, and the conflict's legacy continues to shape Northern Ireland. Efforts at reconciliation have made progress, but sectarian divisions persist. Peace walls still separate communities, and political disagreements occasionally flare. The shadow of Brexit has also complicated relations, particularly concerning the Irish border and the Northern Ireland Protocol. However, the success of the Good Friday Agreement offers hope that even the most intractable conflicts can be resolved through dialogue, compromise, and sustained effort. Join us tomorrow for a look into what the future might hold for Northern Ireland, and thanks as ever for tuning in.